He stayed silent until the bullies awoke the Karate King within. What if the quietest person in the room was once trained to defeat warriors with his bare hands? What if silence wasn't weakness, but restraint? This is the story of a boy who never fought back until the day the bullies pushed too far and woke up the warrior he had tried so hard to bury. No one ever really saw Elijah. At 17, he moved through the hallways of Lincoln High like a shadow, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, voice barely above a whisper. His clothes were plain, second-hand, and his lunch was always something simple and cold. Most assumed he was just another poor kid trying not to be seen. He liked it that way. Silence was safer. Every morning, Elijah took the long route to school, avoiding the main roads, slipping between alleys and backyards, just to avoid unwanted attention. His world was small, filled with old books, faded memories, and routines designed to keep him invisible. Teachers rarely called on him, students barely remembered his name. He sat alone in the cafeteria near the trash bins, chewing slowly, always looking down. If someone bumped into him, he apologized. If they insulted him, he said nothing. And so, the world decided he was weak. But what no one knew, what Elijah had buried deep within him, was a storm, one he had been trained to suppress, one he feared more than anything. Because once, in another life, Elijah wasn't invisible. He was unstoppable. They called themselves the Kings. 3 seniors, Tyler, Jace, and Miguel, rich, popular, and untouchable. The kind of boys whose parents donated to the school, whose charm blinded teachers, and whose cruelty was dismissed as boys being boys. And they hated Elijah. Maybe it was because he didn't respond to their taunts. Maybe because he never laughed at their jokes. Or maybe, deep down, they sensed something in him they didn't understand. Something that didn't fear them. It started small. A trip in the hallway. A spitball to the back of his neck. Then came the crueler games. They'd knock his books out of his hands every morning, draw vile words on his locker. Once they dumped a chocolate milkshake over his head during lunch. Elijah didn't react, not even a flinch. He simply stood, eyes closed, fists clenched, then walked away. The other students laughed. Some pitied him. None intervened. To the Kings, his silence was amusing. To Elijah, it was survival. Every insult, every shove, every cruel word. They were tests. Tests of the discipline that had been drilled into him since childhood. Tests he couldn't afford to fail, because if he lost control, if he let the fire loose, someone would get hurt. But the Kings didn't know that. And like all bullies drunk on their own power, they kept pushing until the day they crossed the line. It was Coach Ramirez who first noticed it. One afternoon, as the school's wrestling team practiced in the gym, Elijah passed by, carrying a stack of used books. The coach was mid-shout, correcting a clumsy takedown, when one of the wrestlers lost balance and stumbled directly into Elijah. The books flew. The wrestler's elbow came dangerously close to Elijah's face, but in less than a second, Elijah moved. A step back, a shift of his hips. His hand shot up, controlled, calm, and stopped the wrestler with a grip so precise, so fluid, that Coach Ramirez blinked. That wasn't instinct, that was training. Elijah didn't say a word. He just bent down, gathered his books, and walked away like nothing had happened. But Ramirez couldn't stop watching him. There was grace in his movements, not just strength, discipline. The kind of discipline only years of martial arts could teach. Later that week, Coach approached the boy gently, asked if he'd ever trained. Elijah's response was firm, but quiet. "I used to." Nothing more. But now the seed was planted. Word spread. Some students whispered that Elijah had once been a tournament fighter. Others claimed his father had trained him in secret. A few even said he'd been expelled from his old school for putting someone in a coma. None of it confirmed. Elijah never answered questions, but now the silence felt different. It wasn't weakness anymore, it was control, and that terrified the Kings. Because bullies don't fear words, they fear consequences. It happened on a rainy Thursday. The kings were restless. Their mockery had lost its thrill. Elijah's silence, once satisfying, now irritated them. They needed more. They wanted to break him. So they waited. After school, in the back parking lot where no cameras reached. Elijah was walking home, backpack slung low, hood up against the drizzle. That's when Tyler grabbed him by the strap and yanked him backward. Elijah stumbled but didn't fall. Jace stepped forward, arms crossed. "Still playing statue, huh? You think you're better than us?" Elijah didn't speak. His eyes scanned them, calm, calculating. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't run. Miguel smiled darkly and pulled out his phone, recording. "Let's see if the monk can bleed." Then Tyler punched him in the stomach, hard. Elijah staggered, gasped, but didn't retaliate. Jace followed with a slap across the face. Miguel laughed behind the screen. They pushed him down, kicked dirt on him. Tyler leaned in and hissed, "Say something, freak." Elijah looked up. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. He stood slowly. The rain soaked his hair, mud clung to his pants, but his posture was different now, shoulders back, chin up, eyes sharp. Something inside him had cracked, or awakened, and he spoke. Not loud, not angry, but with chilling certainty. "You should not have touched me." The kings paused, confused. Then they laughed, until Elijah moved. With speed they couldn't process, with precision they'd never seen. The first hit wasn't even a punch, it was a block. Tyler's fist met Elijah's forearm mid-swing and stopped like it had hit a wall. In the same fluid motion, Elijah turned, caught Tyler's wrist, and with a swift movement brought him to his knees. Jace blinked. That wasn't possible. Elijah was supposed to be weak. Then came the spinning sweep. Jace's feet left the ground. He hit the pavement with a grunt, his pride cracking louder than his bones. Miguel dropped his phone. The laughter died. Elijah didn't roar, didn't gloat. He moved with terrifying calm, every strike precise, every dodge graceful, the kind of movement born not of rage, but of control. Years of training, resurfacing like a tidal wave after years of restraint. He didn't injure them, though he could have. He disarmed them, disgraced them. He made sure they felt small, exposed, powerless. And when it was over, when Tyler lay groaning on the wet pavement and Miguel sat frozen against a car door, Elijah just stood there, breathing slow, eyes clear. The silence returned. But now, it was his silence. One of the teachers rushed out, alerted by a nearby student, but it was too late. The fight was done. Coach Ramirez heard the rumors first. By Monday morning, the entire school was buzzing. Elijah took them all down. No one saw it coming. He moved like a ghost, like a warrior. And the kings? They didn't show up for school the next day, or the one after. When Tyler, Jace, and Miguel finally returned to school, the world had shifted. No one cheered their return. No one clapped them on the back. Instead, whispers followed them down the hall, laced with disbelief, with mockery, and with a strange new reverence. Not for them, but for Elijah. The kings had fallen, and everyone knew it. Tyler sported a neck brace. Jace had a black eye. Miguel kept his head down, hoodie up. They looked nothing like the arrogant giants from weeks before. Their power, built on fear, had vanished. But Elijah, he didn't change. He didn't flaunt it. He didn't brag. He sat in his usual spot during lunch, near the trash bins. Same quiet eyes, same humble lunch. The only difference was, he wasn't alone. A freshman girl asked to sit next to him, then another student, then a few more. He didn't speak much, but his presence was no longer ignored. People nodded at him in the halls. Teachers smiled differently when he entered the room, and most surprisingly, Coach Ramirez invited him to the school's martial arts club. Elijah refused at first, but eventually he showed up, quietly, humbly. He didn't fight to win, he fought to teach. As for the kings, they never dared lay a finger on anyone again. And when people asked what happened that day in the parking lot, They never answered. They had learned a lesson, one far more painful than any punch. Never mistake silence for weakness, never assume the quiet one has nothing to say, and never ever awaken a warrior who chose peace. Elijah never wanted to be a hero. He had spent years trying to forget the fists, the stances, the kata his father drilled into him every sunrise, not because he hated it, but because it reminded him of who he used to be and the person he was afraid to become. Back in his old town, when his mother died, Elijah lost control once, a fight gone too far, a boy hospitalized. Guilt followed him like a shadow ever since. That's why he stayed quiet. That's why he moved cities, changed schools, and buried the warrior deep inside. But fate, cruel and persistent, never lets peace last forever. And when the moment came, when justice had to be served, he didn't choose violence. He chose to remind the world that respect isn't given through fear, but through restraint, through power held back. Now, weeks later, he walks the halls with quiet dignity. People don't fear him. They admire him. They respect the way he carries himself. Not loud, not angry, but steady, balanced. A boy turned warrior who learned to master not just his fists, but his soul. One afternoon, as Elijah closed his locker, a young student approached, nervous, eyes wide. "Is it true?" the boy asked. "You really beat them all?" Elijah looked at him, smiled softly, and said, "I didn't beat anyone. They just taught me how to stop hiding." In a world that celebrates noise and dominance, Elijah taught us something deeper, something timeless. That silence can be power. That dignity is stronger than pride. That true strength isn't shown when we fight, but when we choose not to. So next time you see someone quiet, someone humble, someone who never retaliates, be careful, because they just might be the strongest person in the room. What would you have done in Elijah's place? Have you ever witnessed a moment where silence turned into strength? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose inner warrior is waiting to awaken.